All right, welcome to this Zoom election 2020, Indiana State Senate District 40. We have three Democratic candidates, Trent Fauerbach, Shelli Yoder, and John Zodi. There are no official Republican candidates yet for this election. Joining me now is Shelli Yoder. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, viewers, for tuning in.
So let's just start by giving the voters just some information about who you are for those who may be seeing you for the first time.
Thank you. I'm Shelli Yoder, and I'm running to be your voice in the state Senate for District 40, which is all of Monroe County, but not, well, it's in Monroe County only, but it's not all of Monroe County. But it's just focused right here in the county that I've been serving for the better part of this decade on the Monroe County Council. Now more than ever, we need bold leadership we can trust to get results for Monroe County. Leaders who put people above politics, who listen, who lead with the facts and with heart, and who champion progressive solutions to our greatest challenges. I've spent my life helping women and families in crisis, teaching the next generation and serving our community. As an activist and an innovative leader on the Monroe County Council for the past 7 years. The COVID-19 crisis has shown just how important bold progressive leadership is. We know working families and our neighbors of color are the hardest hit by this pandemic. And it's the highlighted deep disparities that have far too long existed in healthcare, in education, and in our economy. In the past days, and in the days that lie ahead, as we emerge into the next phase of this pandemic, we must fight for responsible and compassionate policies. For example, we shouldn't reopen our non-essential public spaces too quickly, and we must fight to avoid evictions and foreclosures that could be coming very suddenly on the horizon. Over the last several weeks, our campaign has been serving our community, supporting those on the front lines, our hospital workers, small businesses, those volunteering to make masks and donate food. And we've been advocating for progressive solutions to recover from this crisis and build a brighter tomorrow. To combat the climate crisis, protect public schools, make sure our teachers have a living wage, and ensure access to healthcare for all. Decriminalizing marijuana, defending reproductive justice, and making sure our economy works for everyone. We deserve a servant leader and a progressive fighter in the state legislature. And as a state senator, I'll never stop fighting for Monroe County. And I'm asking for the support and your vote on June 2nd.
So you covered a lot of ground there. Let's zero in on just a couple of those. Let's just talk a little bit about what makes you the viable option over the other two candidates. Why should voters vote for you specifically?
Well, I am increasingly concerned about our kids and our grandkids. They won't have the same opportunities as previous generations. That's why our campaign has championed a bold progressive agenda, and that recognizes the intersectionality of many issues that are impacting lives here in our community. As your state senator, I'll fight to improve healthcare and wellness for all, prioritize public education and paying teachers a living wage, combating the climate crisis and fighting for our environment, growing our economy inclusively, protecting workers' rights, ensuring equity for our LGBTQ+ neighbors, Black and brown neighbors, defending reproductive justice, reforming an unjust criminal justice system, and decriminalizing marijuana, ending gun violence, restoring our democracy, and fighting gerrymandering. Each of these areas must be addressed with strategic and collaborative leadership to ensure that all individuals can thrive in Monroe County, but throughout Indiana.
You were defeated by Republican Trey Hollingsworth. That was in the 2016 general election. That was for Indiana's 9th district. What have you or can you take from that as you move forward in this campaign?
Mm-hmm. When I moved from activist to candidate back in 2012, that is a big jump. And deciding to run for Congress as your first race, I certainly learned a lot. But what it provided was this incredible foundation of really understanding Hoosiers' lives. I don't talk about this a lot, but in my early 20s, I was Miss Indiana, and I saw a different kind of Indiana at that time. Serving as a candidate is so much more different. And being one after, working hard on 2 graduate degrees, working as a, in education, working as a nonprofit leader, having that kind of foundation informed the kind of candidate and the kind of fighter I would be. And I was doing that then, hoping to represent people in the People's House in Washington. That didn't work out, and part of that is the way that our districts are now gerrymandered and created. But it gave me an incredible opportunity to then move to serving people on the Monroe County Council. And I've worked for the better part of this decade, 2 years as vice president and 2 years as president, and working bipartisanly on very important issues and still advancing a progressive agenda for this community. I'm proud of the work that we did. I worked well with my colleagues there, and I look forward to working with colleagues across the aisle and with my fellow Democrats in the State House.
Of course, we're in the midst of a pandemic. You mentioned this briefly in your introduction. How would you rate right now the leadership of the state during this pandemic?
I think what's important to think about is we have been warned. We have been talking about pandemics. One of the issues with the climate crisis is the increased incidence of pandemics. And we just were not prepared, and we were caught a little flat-footed. What we were able to do on the Monroe County Council and really looking ahead is we built up our rainy day fund. And I know the state has had a rainy day fund, and we've been able in the county. I was really proud of the way that our local officials have responded, whether it's helping our small businesses, responding with being able to respond with that rainy day fund that on the county council we were able to build up. The state leaders, I think that we've been cautious, and I appreciate that. I am very concerned about the rush to open that we're seeing, and I'm even more concerned about the lack of messaging about the importance of wearing that mask and social distancing. What people need to know, and what I keep talking about, is we Hoosiers, we care about our neighbors. I mean, if somebody is sick, we're asking, what's your favorite casserole? How can I help you? Can I drive you somewhere to go to the doctor? Can I prepare a meal for you or your family? That's who we are as Hoosiers. And so that mask is serves the same purpose as that casserole. It is an act of care for your neighbor. It is not a selfish act, it's a selfless act, because those non-medical masks, they aren't there to protect you, they are there to protect your neighbor. The person on the other side of that counter when you're checking out at the hardware store or at the grocery store. So it needs to be part of our public service that we do, is talking about the role of those masks in keeping each other safe. And I've been disappointed at that kind of messaging. I don't see it, I'm not hearing it, but it should be coming from the top, and we need to be talking about it in every circle, with our business leaders talking about it and the importance of their employees wearing those masks. It protects each other. And that's what we should be talking about right now in these days of the COVID-19.
If you were to win this seat and take effect, next year, of course, we don't know what's going to happen with this pandemic, but let's just say we're looking at an economic recovery time next year. If you're in that seat, what is your plan to help revive the economy?
Without a doubt, we are going to be talking about this. And I think the magical thinking that this is somehow just going to disappear and not have an impact on our economy is misguided. But we have an opportunity. We have seen through COVID-19 the real fissures that exist in racial disparities, in healthcare and education and in the economy. We have an opportunity to reset and to be very mindful in making sure that our brown and Black neighbors, that women have access to funding that we are now seeing they haven't had the access when we are talking about recovery for our economy. In the state of Indiana, I think what would be really helpful is our neighboring states have something called a work share program, and it affords small businesses the opportunity to maintain and retain their really good employees without having to furlough them if they're having some difficulties in making payroll. So a work share program it's not entirely furloughing employees, it's having an opportunity to do half and half. If you can do a little bit of unemployment and still keep them employed, it helps people stay whole and engaged in their employment with not having to go entirely into unemployment and dipping into the unemployment that the state is given. I think innovative ideas like this are proven to be effective and helpful in other states, and Indiana should be looking to those examples as ways that we can recover this economy. But we need to do so mindful and inclusively, that we're recovering the economy, attending to these racial disparities and the minority disparities that we know exist.
You know, it's interesting times. How do you campaign during a pandemic? And do you feel like the election is being kind of lost in the pandemic?
Well, we're certainly doing all that we can. One of the things that's important is moving Indiana away from being a vote in person state to a vote by mail state. We can do this. We must be talking about how removing the hurdles to vote absentee has been a win for the state of Indiana. And this should not be temporary. We should remove all requirements of voting by mail here in the Hoosier state. And that has been a win, but it should not be tied to COVID-19. This should be tied to a strong, healthy democracy, getting more people involved in the civic duty of voting. My hope is that our campaign has been talking about making sure that you keep yourself and your family safe by applying for your absentee vote, which has to happen by tomorrow at midnight. You need to get that application in. But the wonderful thing, I had commented on how that rainy day fund and being a very fiscal and responsible steward of taxpayers' money on the county council, it afforded us to be able to send an absentee ballot application to every registered voter in Monroe County. So you should have received one. Make sure you fill that out today and by tomorrow, because the deadline is at midnight tomorrow. But as soon as you get that ballot, as soon as you get that ballot in the mail, after you send in that absentee ballot, you need to fill it out, because there's a lot going on right now and people are distracted, as you say. So as soon as you get that ballot, sit down, do your voter education, get the ballot filled out and send it in immediately, because people need to understand that it needs to be in the hands of the election board by noon on June 2nd. Not postmarked, not dropped into the mailbox, in the hands of our election board. So that is a little bit different than how people have been able to, show up on the day of voting and to vote. While you still can do that, I am encouraging people to be safe, keep their families safe, and keep our poll workers safe, even though they're going to be fully covered in PPE and lots of hand sanitizers. But we want to keep everybody safe. So vote early and vote by mail.
How should the state support higher education coming out of the shutdowns?
We made a promise to our teachers to increase their wages. A Rockefeller study came out, and Indiana is at the lowest of what we pay our teachers since 2002, and we need to remedy that. And we promised them that in this last session. We cannot go back on our promise, and I will be a fighter in making sure that we make whole those teachers' salaries. We can do this, and I've been asked, how do we address the teachers shortage in Indiana? It isn't rocket science. Pay people a living wage that they can support themselves and their families, and people will want to listen to the call in their lives to go into the vocation of teaching. It's that simple. So one of the ways that we can support public education is to make sure our teachers are paid living wages.
And how about higher education, universities, IU, as they move forward and are looking for funding as well?
I'm a teacher. I teach at the Kelley School of Business, and I appreciate the mindfulness and the looking to science and the innovation and the compassion that IU leaders have had in looking at how we will reopen in the fall and what that will look like. No decision has been made, but the decision to make sure that our faculty feel heard, listened to, and empowered to bring the best and create the best classroom possible for our students, that will never falter. That's what IU has done, and I have felt completely supported as, as an educator in that space. And I know that they will, in every decision, have the best interest of our students at heart and make sure that we do so in a very careful and innovative way as we look to the fall to open up.
How about quality childcare in Indiana? What can the state do to help support Hoosier children?
We got so close of making sure that pre-K is funded. We got so close as a state, but we really dropped the ball. So I want to be advancing. Pre-K education and kindergarten should be available and required for all students, because those early years of 4 and 5, those are really precious years in terms of brain development. And we want to set up our next generation for success. So we should be providing this for all Hoosier children and making sure that they have access to just the best education possible through quality pre-K and kindergarten programs in our public education system.
All right, 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up here. How would you see your role as a member of the minority party in the Senate, which surely would be if elected as a Democrat?
Well, there are 3 numbers that I think are really important. We only have 50 state senators, and 40 of them are Republicans. So there are only 10 Democrats. It is a super minority if you want to speak about numbers. Only 2 of those are women. And I'm proud to be a part of been endorsed by 25 for 20, which is an Indiana movement trying to get more parity and more representation and more women into the state house. I'm also endorsed by Emily's List, which is a very progressive agenda trying to get more women elected into politics. And so those 2 organizations see the value and see the effectiveness of having women serve us in the state house. And the lack of that voice in the state house has been evident. I will use my experience having served on the Monroe County Council, working alongside my Republican friends and my Democratic friends to get work done and get really helpful things for Monroe County accomplished. It does take collaboration, it takes bridge building, it takes reaching across the aisle. And I will be that kind of a leader. But let me be clear here. Advancing progressive agenda will take a loud voice. And when we look at the way that we've been able to accomplish gay marriage, that took not backing down from what we knew was the right thing for our LGBTQ plus neighbors, that we needed to be talking about equity and equality. And here we have gay marriage. Let's talk about the decriminalization of marijuana. It used to be taboo to even talk about that, but now we have bipartisanship support for moving in that direction. Let's talk about the way we responded to the opioid epidemic and my leadership specifically in responding to that crisis here in our community. And now Monroe County was seen as a leader. When we look at the way that we were able to engage harm reduction programs and specifically the syringe program that we have in Monroe County, we're leading the state. So while we do need to build those bridges, we cannot back down to what we know when science and evidence shows us in progressive agenda points. We need to have a fighter for us, fighting for those issues in the State House. It might take some time, but we shouldn't back down, because in time, we will have friends across the aisle and we can push these right policies forward for Hoosiers in the state of Indiana.
Okay, and last question. Biggest challenge facing District 40, and how does that compare to the biggest challenge facing the state? And then how do you move that forward?
Well, what we know in Monroe County is the cost of living is incredibly high for our residents. And whether it's affordable housing, whether it's being able to afford paying the groceries, paying the utility bills, cost of living in Monroe County is higher than most other places in Indiana. And so I've been talking about minimum wage, and we can't even get that to 15 when we know that in Monroe County it's over $16 in order to have a living wage and pay the bills. So in Indiana, yes, times might be tight, but for Monroe County, times are a little paying those bills, it's a lot tighter, from making sure that we're protecting people right away from foreclosures and evictions. We should be talking about that day one in the 2021 General Assembly with the impact of COVID-19, because I think that will more readily impact the citizens and residents of Monroe County. And that is where my heart is right now, and really thinking about ways that we can address housing needs for people in our county.
Shelli Yoder, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joe, and I appreciate you putting together this innovative way to get the message out to voters. So thank you so much. I'm Shelli Yoder. I'm running to represent you in the State House. I ask for your support and your vote on or before June 2nd.